17 weeks down. Your home league has been finished. Hopefully you've been paid out already. Hopefully you're not playing in week 18 in that league, but that's a whole nother story. DFS in week 18 is an animal, and we are here to help you tame that beast. The first problem we need to solve is who is even playing this week? Let's figure it out together. What is up? Welcome to the DFS Academy presented by Club Fantasy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse, and like the NFL, half of our stars are taking a rest week. It's just me and Austin Amandolia. How are you this? I was going to say evening, but I have to remember people don't usually watch this in the evening, but we are still recording on Thursday. How are you doing, Austin?
Doing great. It feels weird to not be missing football right now as we record this show. The first Thursday without football in like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah,
Well,
I was going to say it sort of affects the main slate, but it's the least of factors whatsoever on the main slate. And then you have the weird main slate that I'll bring up right now where FanDuel is including the Sunday night game, but DraftKings is not. So
I forget that they do that. They do that sometimes, and I never know how to predict when it's coming.
Well, me, who dips a toe in the DFS pool, if you will, I put out a post. I do rankings for football guys. And I said, hey, big mistake. FanDuel has the Miami players. And then I was like, nope, not a mistake. I'm just an idiot. So they called me out pretty quickly on that one. So without Kelly, you're not going to get a ton of tournament talk here. So Austin is going to focus on cash as he always does. But here's the thing, especially this week, the right players are kind of just the right players. And then I'll challenge Austin a little bit on his players and bring up some of the people that I have highly ranked in my rankings. If you guys are new to the show, welcome. Week 18, I imagine there are a lot of people who are done with fantasy football right now and are not done with redraft fantasy football, will still have the itch. And that is precisely what DFS is here for. We talk a lot about DraftKings and FanDuel, and we don't just talk DFS. You can actually play with us as well. You will find links in the description of this video and Austin's article that'll drop later on today, where you can join leagues against myself, Austin. Kelly will probably still play with us on both DraftKings and FanDuel. They are $2 leagues. It's a chance to win yourself a little bit of money. Plus, we announce the name of the winner on this show every single week, though this is the last week. So this winner won't get their name announced, though. Austin and you and Josh are talking about maybe doing some playoff stuff as well. So we'll find a way to get your name in Austin's article at the very least, since there won't be a show next week to talk to you about this. But we'll get you taken care of, I promise. Let's start, Austin, as we always do, with a look back. Week 17, an enormous week for fantasy football, championship week for most redraft leagues, and some players went off, specifically Lamar Jackson. So last week's Millionaire Maker scored 221 points, which is a higher total than we've seen, I think, for a little while. They had Lamar Jackson, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, Devontae Adams, Zay Flowers, Darius Slayton, George Kittle, Wan'Dale Robinson, and the Houston defense. And before we even talk about Devontae Adams or whoever you want to talk about here, the balls to put two Giants wide receivers in a lineup. Very weird decision-making for me. Devontae Adams did go off last week, 40.6 on DraftKings, 31.1 on FanDuel. However, I think Lamar Jackson needs brought up as well, Austin. 5 touchdowns last week. Lamar Jackson's got to be the NFL MVP at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was bugging one of my friends about this who's a 49ers fan about 2 weeks ago before they played. And I was like, MVP odds, you get on Lamar now. And he's like, I can't, because then I have to bet against my team. I was like, it's a happiness hedge. He didn't take me up on it. And now Lamar is at like minus 20,000 to win the MVP. So,
Yep.
Wins and losses.
I'll tell you what I'm mad about. And that is, there were about 3 weeks ago great odds on Buffalo to win their division. And I understand they haven't done anything yet. But if they win this week, they win their division. They are either the 2 seed or they are out of the playoffs. And I am so upset that I didn't just throw a little bit of money on Buffalo to win the division when they were talking about it, because I'm like, they have every bit the chance. We knew Miami wasn't going to be as dominant as we'd like them to be. And so for it to come down to this week and now you're not going to get any of those great odds. That's one I regret as well. But I know I like the Lamar Jackson MVP. I wish I'd put a little money on Baker Mayfield comeback player of the year, but Joe Flacco might be screwing that all up right now too. So.
Yeah, it's a wild time in those betting markets. But for the week 17 slate, I mean, Lamar just decided to save all of his touchdowns for week 17, I guess, because he hasn't been scoring a ton of passing touchdowns this year. Like, it's been like 1 or 2 per game. And then he's just like, cool, 5 touchdowns and what? It was like 18 completions too. It was like a ridiculous touchdown rate.
Super high efficiency, which it helps when Zay Flowers goes for a 98-yard touchdown or whatever. So
yeah, so it was just a wild week. I don't even know how to take lessons from this DFS winning lineup. Honestly, it's kind of like, yeah.
Well, when you look, okay, so Lamar made sense. I was scared off of Zay Flowers because Lamar's like that independent variable. You don't feel like you need to stack Lamar. Travis Etienne had been down, so you did not expect a pop week. Kenneth Walker has been hit or miss. Devontae Adams has certainly been down. But as I brought up, kudos to you, had called out Wan'Dale Robinson was a good play last week, but we certainly weren't expecting Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson because Tyrod Taylor is all of a sudden playing.
Yeah, hey, Tyrod Taylor, he could be in your cash lineup this week because he was a good cash play last week too with his salary at 4,600, and he scored like 20 fantasy points. It was a good week for the Giants offense.
I agree completely. It was a strange one, but like I said, you were on the Wan'Dale Robinson. Actually, after he went off, a lot of people were showing their takes, clearly things I had missed ahead of time. Not that I would have been ever willing to throw money on Wan'Dale Robinson, though that might change in week 18. Let's start with top of the class. These are the high priced players, $8,000 or above. Austin's going to be focusing, as I mentioned, on cash. And Austin, I hate to ever take your bullet points away from you, but when I originally came into the document, you just had the word no one with multiple exclamation points, but you have since made a change there.
Yeah, I made a change mostly because it's just me, and I was hoping Kelly was gonna have someone. So I was like, well, I'll throw someone in there. So I have CeeDee Lamb. He's probably the best option at the 8,000 or more price point this week. He is 9,300 on DraftKings, 10K on FanDuel. I don't know that I feel comfortable doing that on FanDuel. He really has to get into the end zone, which he can definitely do. But I feel a little bit better on DraftKings where he's probably going to get 8 or 9 receptions. And so he can meet his salary on DraftKings just from the catch volume. Again, I'm probably not playing anyone this expensive this week just because there are so many value plays that I like on this slate. But CeeDee Lamb, he's always a great option. Washington's defense is garbage. And, the thing about week 18 is like who needs to win and who doesn't. And Dallas, they actually have a real reason to win this game and to play to win because they want to lock up the 2 seed. If they lose, there's a pathway for them to not have the 2 seed. And honestly, the way that the Dallas Cowboys home road splits have broken out this year, if they have to play playoff games on the road, it's going to really reduce their chances of making it deep into the playoffs. Obviously, like if they end up playing San Francisco, that's going to be on the road no matter what. But if they can lock up the 2 seed, they're at home until that game against the 49ers, which who knows, if something weird happens with the 49ers, they then lock up home field advantage through to the Super Bowl. So they have a big incentive to win this game. And I think CeeDee Lamb provides a good pathway for them to have success this week.
I agree. And when I thought you were going to go with no one, I was going to actually challenge you on Lamb, but also the 4 high-priced wide receivers at this price range are interesting to me because their teams are all playing for something. Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably the one I'm least interested in right now just because he's been inconsistent. Goff's been inconsistent. However, there's one that is an independent because I don't think you're going to be able to fit A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts into a lineup right now. But I do feel like A.J. Brown taking on the Giants in a pretty big game for Philadelphia as well is interesting. But the one that's interesting to me in a stack, and I don't know if this stack is good for cash or for tournament, would be the return of Nick Mullins with Justin Jefferson, which we saw some really nice week 16 results. Is that something? Is Nick Mullins too risky if he helps you get Justin Jefferson into your lineup?
Yeah, he's too risky for my flavor. If I were going with because essentially at that point you're punting at quarterback. And if I'm going to punt at quarterback this week, I'm going to look for a guy like Tyrod Taylor who has a great matchup. Like the Philadelphia Eagles secondary has not been good, and also has shown that he has the upside. He runs the ball, so he has a little bit of floor to him there as well. Nick Mullins is just so volatile. Like he could throw for 4 interceptions, and if he doesn't also get the touchdowns, then he might not get there on DraftKings. So he's a fun tournament play, particularly if you're trying to get leverage off of people who are maybe paying up for Jalen Hurts. Yeah. So I'd prefer him in tournament lineups with Justin Jefferson. I think Jefferson is a fine cash play just because he's Justin Jefferson, and I honestly think you could get away with AJ Brown as well. Tyreek Hill, I'm a little bit. I think so. Do the Dolphins? Do they make the playoffs no matter what?
Yes, Dolphins are in. But it's a question of, I think, the 2 seed versus the 5 seed, if I remember correctly. I know they miss Kansas City no matter what happens. So I just remember studying there. And then I do want to throw out, because we brought up Tyreek Hill, the Dolphins Bills are available on the main slate of FanDuel, but not on DraftKings. So anything we're talking about with Tyreek Hill, because when I was doing my rankings, FanDuel is a touchdown heavy platform, Austin. And so I was like, of course I'm putting Tyreek Hill in here. Are you serious? And I threw Stephon Diggs in too, because it's a must-win game for the Bills.
Yeah, which honestly, I think that also makes Tyreek Hill an interesting tournament play on FanDuel, because people might not be thinking about the fact that the Miami Buffalo game is on that main slate. And they also they may just be down on it in general and be thinking elsewhere. So I'm interested in having that as a tournament play on FanDuel.
I'll throw this out there. A lot of the other rankers, I can see 3 of them on one screen right now. I am the only ranker of football guys right now who ranked Tyreek Hill. So it's a very similar situation where there may be like, it's too weird having them in the main slate, but I'm like, it's FanDuel and he's Tyreek Hill. I'm willing to take a flyer if I can afford him. AJ Brown, for what it's worth, just 2 weeks ago against these New York Giants, 11 targets, but only caught 6 balls for 80 yards. However, you find the end zone with that stat line, and all of a sudden it's looking a lot prettier. Guys, this is going to be a probably pretty quick show. It's going to be Austin providing the expertise and me providing the anecdotes. But if you guys ever have questions, you can see our Twitter handles here. You can follow Club Fantasy at Club Fantasy FFL, or even drop questions in the links for this video. Someone's going to get you answered and get you helped out. Anything you want to know DFS, I encourage you to follow Austin. He's such a great follow and so thoughtful in his takes. We're going to move on to band nerds. These are the great students who spend a little bit too much extra time practicing their instrument. They're sharp, but they're probably not going to reach the top of the class. Austin, let's start again. These are the $6,000 to $8,000 players. You have guys that I love. Both were a couple of the first 2 that I ranked this week.
Yeah, so these are both a couple of cash plays. So first, probably my cash running back of the week is Rachaad White, who is $7,600 on DraftKings, $7,700 on FanDuel. Very close in pricing between the 2 sites, which is always means there's value to be had. Basically, it's the Panthers that you're playing, and it's Rachaad White. Like, that's the formula you need. Bad defense, heavy volume running back. The Panthers have been better in recent weeks against running backs, admittedly, but they still have shown that they can give it up to running backs. And frankly, they're a garbage franchise and they just got
destroyed by Travis Etienne last week.
Right. It's, I think the fact that Arthur Smith decided not to play Bijan Robinson against them 3 weeks ago is skewing some of their running back numbers lately. But, it happens. Also, though, last week was Rachaad White's first game without 20 touches in 4 games. That's just not going to repeat. He kind of got game scripted out last week with Tampa Bay getting just destroyed by New Orleans. But I think Rachaad White's going to go back to that level of volume he had before. And the Buccaneers have something to play for this week, because if they win, they're in. If they don't, then Atlanta or New Orleans could sneak their way into the playoffs, which God help us if they do. But I like Rachaad White this week. The volume has been there, and he's shown the efficiency, or enough efficiency. He's not efficient, let's be clear, but he can get in the end zone and he can catch some passes. And so from a fantasy perspective, we're good.
Before you move on, I feel like this is the sweet spot for running backs this week. There are a couple of cheaper options. I don't think anyone's going to really go more expensive because nobody wants to trust Christian McCaffrey this week. but there are a couple of, or you can't trust because he's not playing. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Regardless, there are a couple of options that fall into this that I think are really, really solid plays. I'm going to throw some of these names at you. Maybe you can break down for me whether they're more tournament options or cash options. And I want to start with a guy who I've been getting a lot of questions about for those who are playing in week 18. And that's Zamir White of the Raiders. He is taking on, why am I blanking right now? Denver. So Denver has given up a ton of points to fantasy running backs this year, and it's in Las Vegas. We've seen a rejuvenated Las Vegas team under Alec Pierce as head coach. Is Zamir White someone who is a kind of stuff him into your lineup option at $6,000, or is this someone who you would be better on your larger tournament plays?
Yeah, I feel comfortable with Zamir White, honestly, as a cash play. He also could provide some salary savings for a tournament. I think the only issue on the tournament side is he may not have the upside that some other running backs have. But at 6K on DraftKings, I mean, it's fine. I think most likely we'll have to monitor the reports to see what happens with Josh Jacobs. I would be surprised if Josh Jacobs plays. Like, my guy, he spent half the offseason trying to get paid, and getting hurt in a week 18 game that doesn't mean anything isn't going to get him paid in 2024. So I don't see any reason for him to play in this game. So like Zamir White from that standpoint, he's averaged between 15 and 17 DraftKings points per game while he's been the starter for Josh Jacobs. So he definitely is someone I'm keeping my eye on for cash lineups this week.
And then I wasn't going to let you go a whole show without talking about him. Bijan Robinson, is this the week 18, when he's not going to help any fantasy manager whatsoever? New Orleans, typically a tougher defense against running backs, but who knows what's going on with your Atlanta Falcons at this point. He falls right in that range at 6,900. How are we feeling about him in the insignificant week 18?
Yeah, typically a tougher opponent for running backs, except for, I guess, Bijan Robinson, because when they played in week 12, Bijan Robinson scored 2 touchdowns.
There you go.
And he had put up 27.3 DraftKings points. I think it's probably the perfect time to play Bijan Robinson in a tournament setting. He will not be anywhere near any cash lineup I am considering, probably for the next 2 years. But he definitely, because of that, is an interesting tournament play. Just because, too, nobody's going to want to play him.
I was going to say, and the story tells itself that he goes off in week 18 because nobody wants this at this point.
I will say it is a game on the road, so the matchup that doesn't necessarily favor him from that standpoint, and he tends to do better at home, oddly enough, which is, I don't understand why that would matter. I guess Arthur Smith can't look his fans directly in the face and not play Sean Robinson.
I thought it was maybe because Arthur Blank was breathing down Arthur Smith's neck, and that's what causes the better carries at home. So what chaos. But yes, Bijan Robinson, I think, is an excellent tournament. Wow, excellent is that's hyperbole of the highest order, but he's a good tournament play this week. Yes, an interesting tournament play. Another interesting tournament play. The at least for one more week quarterback of the Chicago Bears, and then the offseason has a story to tell.
Yeah, and I think he's good in cash games as well this week. Justin Fields is $7,200 on DraftKings, $8,400 on FanDuel. He's the third most expensive quarterback on FanDuel, which is fascinating this week. But I do like him. He's got the rushing upside. We all know what he can do athletically, but also Green Bay's defense has really struggled down this stretch. They've allowed the 8th most points to quarterbacks since week 14. As for Justin Fields, he has a rushing touchdown in 3 of his last 4 games, and he has averaged 65.5 rushing yards per game since his return from injury. I was blown away by the stat because even though he's got the nice rushing floor, he hasn't been getting those like 40-point games that we got from him last year. So I feel like in some ways, Justin Fields is kind of snuck under the radar. But if you think about 60 rushing yards, averaging 60 rushing yards, that's 6 fantasy points right there off the bat for your lineup. If he gets in the end zone too, you got 12 fantasy points from Justin Fields rushing alone, which is a great floor for your cash lineup. And he throws for, 200 yards on top of that. You're hitting that 20-point mark and you're feeling good.
Yeah, you'd like to see Cole Kmet, DJ Moore fully healthy this week just to kind of give him a little bit of the upside in the passing game. I shudder to think about a Justin Fields where Darnell Mooney and Equinemius St. Brown are our main options with a Big Bob Tunyon in there. So no, I agree completely. When I did my rankings, I moved Fields in at third right away. I had trouble moving him ahead, even though he is far more affordable. Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts jumped off the page at me as guys who definitely have something big to play for this week. Josh Allen is kind of in a similar situation. Again, he's only available on FanDuel, but he's also hugely expensive. Not that Dak and Jalen Hurts aren't, but Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts, it's just interesting to me, Austin, when we look at kind of the top tier plays by a quarterback right now, it's two guys who are playing for their team season and another guy in Fields who's basically just playing for his career because certainly the Bears aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, completely. And I think Dak Prescott for sure is a cash play option this week if you want to spend a little bit more. I'm preferring to save a little bit and go with Justin Fields instead. And similar rationale with Jalen Hurts. Like he's got the floor there, right? Like there's the odds that he ends up at the 1 yard line and gets tush pushed into the end zone are pretty dang high. Like it just keeps happening for him this year. And so obviously he's got the floor there. I'm just trying to save a little bit of money at quarterback to keep that budget balanced, but I think the two of them have solid floors. You could go with Prescott or Hurts and feel comfortable in your cash lineup.
Nah, I agree completely. Moving on to Bookworms. These are the $4,000 to $6,000 players. Quiet, their nose in the books, but watch out, they can surprise you. Austin, you mentioned him last week. I gave credit where credit's due. I didn't think we were going to see Wan'Dale Robinson's name in fantasy football for a very long time, but it appears with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, he is a legitimate option with the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mean, first off, his salary is just great. This is like effectively a punt play on DraftKings in particular. He's
but it's a punt play for a wide receiver one.
Right. And he's $5,900 on FanDuel, so they priced him up a little bit more. He's just got ridiculous target volume right now. He had 9 targets last week, and now he's going up against a struggling Eagles defense. Like I don't trust this Eagles secondary at all, and so I think Robinson has plenty of opportunity to have some upside this week. He also scored a rushing touchdown last week, which was surprising to me. I did not expect that to happen. I was just kind of going for the volume play. But he did all of that he did last week, and his price only increased by $200. I'm like, who's not doing their job?
Well, I was just going to say they were all done at week 17 as well. They don't care anymore.
Right. And this wasn't even like a Monday night game where it's like, oh, they had already set the salaries. No. This happened on Sunday. Everybody watched it happen, and people at DraftKings are like, "Yep, $200 more. That's all we need. That'll be fine." Which sometimes that makes me nervous, but I feel good about where Wan'Dale Robinson is. It's such a good spot, and the Giants want to play spoiler. They want to ruin the Eagles' day, and they're going to be playing their minds out.
I agree. And Wan'Dale Robinson, though not remotely the same guy, not the same body build, but plays a similar role to what Deebo Samuel does for the San Francisco 49ers, where they get him the ball in a lot of different areas. My question to you is on FanDuel, where it's a little bit more touchdown heavy, big plays kind of, well, I guess big plays kind of help you a little bit more on DraftKings with the bonuses. Is Darius Slayton kind of neck and neck? I mean, I think they're basically the same price on the two websites. So.
Yeah, I just feel like I don't feel as comfortable with Darius Slayton just because he feels a little bit more boom bust. Because last week he had that one catch that was like an 80, 90-yard touchdown, and that was the bulk of his production. So he only had 4 receptions for 100 yards. So he's not getting the consistent level of volume that I would like to see. Whereas Wan'Dale Robinson, we've seen him earlier in the year getting the level of volume that he did last week. So even though, he's had in his past 4 weeks, he had 9 targets, 7 targets, 4 targets, and 7 targets. So one down game, but he's still like 3 of his last 4 games has 7 or more targets, which is the level of volume that we really like to see for cash. I think, Darius Slayton, he might be an interesting tournament play because of the high upside there. But I'm not betting on him hitting that ceiling 2 weeks in a row. Maybe that's a good reason to play him again, but I prefer him only in tournament settings.
I'll throw out he's actually $200 cheaper on each website. So if somehow you've built your lineup that you just can't afford Wan'Dale Robinson, Slayton might be your alternative play. And then Austin, I have a confession here. When I was going through, and I'm probably wrong here, but when I was going through and ranked my top 8 tight ends. Your next guy didn't even make my list. So now I feel like I need to go back and take a look at something.
Well, it's funny because, like, honestly, I could see Dallas Goedert being a tournament play this week just because I feel like out of the tight ends on the slate, he could easily fly under the radar. I mean, you always have Travis Kelce as an option, but Sam Laporta is on the slate, Trey McBride, Evan Ingram has been getting consistent targets. I feel like those are all players that people might be interested in. Jake Ferguson in that matchup we've talked about earlier. But Dallas Goedert, he's $5,100 on DraftKings and $6,100 on FanDuel. And like we've talked about already, Philadelphia still has something to play for. They're trying to beat out Dallas. I think they can also hit the second seed if things go their way. So they need to win this game. And the New York Giants are allowing the 4th most points to tight ends since week 14. Additionally, Devonta Smith got a little banged up in the game last week with that ankle sprain that he's been working through. So this could lead to more usage from Dallas Goedert. We've seen those two actually kind of have some negative correlation. We've seen when Dallas Goedert's out of the lineup, Devonta Smith pops off. And when he comes back, then they start kind of eating into each other's target shares. So I like Goedert this week. And he's continued to be a vital part of the Philadelphia offense.
It's such a good point with the Devonta Smith. I do shows every Monday with Josh Hudson, and Josh, a big Eagles fan, loves to point out that it's Goedert and Smith that eat into one another. AJ Brown seems to be the safe option right now. And so, yes, if Smith is going to be limited in any way, that is going to be a plus game for Goedert. You brought up Travis Kelce, and I think this is a good time, since we have a little time to kill on the show, to bring up how are we handling some of these bigger name guys where we know some of their teammates are not playing, but they may be. And I don't believe Kelce has been confirmed as out yet. Correct me if I'm wrong there.
I have not seen him confirmed out. I would be surprised if he plays a lot, but
exactly. So guys like Travis Kelce, and then the other 2 names, and they don't come up on your sheet at all, that I find very interesting. Actually, 3 names that I find very interesting that a lot of their teammates have been announced out and they are not, and they're actually all playing each other. And that is Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Puka Nacua, where they announced Cooper Kupp's out, but they didn't announce that Puka Nacua was going to miss the game. I'm certain you're going to tell me no in cash. Are any of these guys cash viable? But if not, certainly, would you find room for any of these guys even in a tournament lineup, or is that kind of throwing away an entry to you?
I definitely not in cash. The San Francisco one is interesting too because Kyle Shanahan was like, "Yeah, we may have some of our starters play a little bit, like TBD." He kind of like was like, "I'm not really going to tell you."
Yeah.
So it is an interesting thing. I don't know that I would do it in large tournament settings. If I were playing, let's say I were doing like a showdown slate for one of these games, or if I were doing, you could do some like the early only or the late only game. So like if you do just the 1:00 games, there's like 6 games playing at 1:00. So it's a smaller pool of players to begin with. Then maybe I would consider it. I feel like there are just so many other options that if you go that route, you're basically throwing away a lineup in like if you're doing the full main slate. But if you're doing some of these other contests, I could maybe see an argument for it here and there. I probably won't lean into it unless we get some clear indication that they're really going to play these guys. But honestly, like with with the 49ers in particular, I could see it being more like a preseason deal where they play a drive and then they're done.
Keep loose to have them go through the pregame motions and get a little bit of something out of that. What's interesting, that's such a good point, because what's interesting is I was going to point out the 49ers wide receivers with Sam Darnold could be mildly interesting. Whereas I don't know if I'm Carson Wentz and Puka Nacua. I don't know if I'm just buying into that. We haven't seen Wentz in a long time. And when we did see him, it was no bueno. So I just don't know that I want to have Carson Wentz anywhere involved in any sort of lineup this week. Guys, as we wind down to the show, I want to remind you once again, you can play against Austin, myself, and even later on in the show, Austin and I are going to announce a head-to-head lineup against each other. It may not be the lineup we play against you guys, but we can't give you all of our secrets. But again, you guys can play against us on both FanDuel and DraftKings. $2 buy-in. We'll announce the name of the winner in Austin's article next week. So make sure you guys are looking for the link in the description of this video and in his article that's going to drop later on today. We continue with my favorite category, C's Get Degrees. These are the pump plays. These are the sub $4,000 plays. And Austin, you got a name that we haven't had to talk about in a little while, but with the current state of tight ends, I feel like his name needs brought up. So.
Yeah, honestly, like this is a hilarious one to me. So I love preseason football and I will watch as much as I can and I'll like watch the highlights and I'll start listing out players that catch my attention. And 2 years ago, Tanner Hudson caught my eye. He was playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I was like, "Ooh, this is a fun little stash." And all of a sudden, he's become sort of relevant in fantasy the past few weeks. Like
Jake Browning loves him.
he's getting consistent volume, which is wild. And he's only $3,100 on DraftKings. He's $4,900 on FanDuel. They don't quite get us as cheap on FanDuel. But I think Hudson is a solid option if you're just punting tight end off a cliff this week. Like he is so cheap and he gets just enough volume that it's tempting. Cleveland is also not a great matchup right now for they're a good matchup for tight ends right now. They're not doing well against tight ends. They've allowed the second most points to the position over the past 4 weeks. Also, like they don't have anything to play for. They have their playoff spot locked up. So I could see them taking it easy on their defense. Like the worst case scenario for the Browns right now is to have some unnecessary injuries, especially on the defense, which is helped keep them in the season while they've been sorting out their quarterback situation. And now that Joe Flacco's there, they're just lighting the world on fire.
Yeah.
But back to Tanner Hudson. Surprisingly, he has at least 4 targets in 8 out of his 11 games this year. I was shocked when I saw that stat. I knew like I had seen him getting a lot of uses this year, but I didn't realize he was getting that much volume. And 4 targets for a tight end that's priced $3,100 on DraftKings, like that's fine. 3 catches for 30 yards, and you get to spend up elsewhere. Like, great, love it.
No, I think it's such a great call. And as I brought up, Jake Browning just seems to love the guy. They both kind of popped that very first week together. But like you said, Hudson took that job away from Irv Smith pretty early in the season. People just didn't know who the hell he was, so nobody was really messing around with him. But it's something you've talked about with punting on tight ends for a while. Very safe floor, 3 catches for 30 yards. He's already basically doubled his salary over on DraftKings. But if he throws a touchdown in there, then he gets that little flame next to his name, and you feel like you made a really, really good choice on your very small pay. One other player I want to throw at you because he had such a good week last week. In fact, the tight end won last week, but did not price up very high is Juwan Johnson. Now, Atlanta, you would know better than most, has struggled against the tight end, but it's been so hit or miss where you don't know which Atlanta is actually going to show up that week. Jesse Bates seems to decide early on whether he's going to be the guy who stops the run or stops the tight end. And I think that kind of makes the decision for Atlanta. So.
Yeah, I was struggling with this one. I had Juwan Johnson as I was working on picking players from our article, I had Juwan Johnson at one point and I decided to go a little bit lower. Actually, no, I had Juwan Johnson and then I replaced him with Dallas Goedert because I thought Dallas Goedert was such a good play. He needed mention. So I do like Juwan Johnson in cash this week against the Falcons just because we mentioned it earlier in the year and we haven't come back to it in recent weeks, but I think it still applies. Is they just don't defend the middle of the field very well. Yeah. And even AJ Terrell has struggled in recent weeks. He's been getting beat by outside receivers. So I think this Falcons defense can be had. And I don't think Jesse Bates he's going to threaten Juwan Johnson's uses that much. I think he can be a little frisky, maybe intercept Derek Carr here or there. But I think Juwan Johnson is a fine cash play this week and also probably a good tournament play. Like if you're playing Bijan Robinson on the other side of that matchup, you can get a little correlation going there, and it could be a surprisingly frisky matchup in week 18.
And I completely inadvertently led you into your last pick, which is that Atlanta Falcons defense. So you do think Jesse Bates could maybe be the guy, and obviously there could be some other players there, but that Falcons defense could be someone. Derek Carr's not afraid to turn the ball over.
Yeah, Derek Carr's not afraid to turn the ball over, and the New Orleans Saints aren't afraid to allow sacks. They have struggled in pass protection throughout the season, and the Falcons they have some talented pass rushers up front. They've been banged up in recent weeks, so they've been a little bit more volatile, but I still like their pass rush, and they've been frisky throughout the year. And then, like you mentioned, Jesse Bates has been playing at a Pro Bowl level. He was announced as the Pro Bowl. Yeah. Shout out to Jesse Bates, and he deserves it. And it's in part because he's been forcing turnovers and doing well in pass defense. So I really like this matchup this week for Atlanta. It's also a divisional matchup with playoff implications on the line, and I expect the defense to show up for that. You sure as hell can't rely on the offense, so I'm sure the Falcons defense is going to be getting hyped to try and lead them to a playoff game.
Yeah, what a wild week for the NFC South. It's going to be a fun one. And Carolina, you brought up, Giants playing spoiler. I'd love to see Carolina play some great football this week too. Not because I want Tampa Bay to lose, just because I love chaos and I want to see how it all turns out. So, all right, guys, that brings us on to the prop quiz brought to you by BetStamp. BetStamp funnels all of your betting and DFS needs into one place to help you get the best bang for your bets. If you check the link in the description of this video, you will be able to find the sports books and DFS sites that are available in your state, plus any of the deposit matches that those sites offer. Austin used it, found some really cool new sites this season. Also, Austin's been crushing it with the prop bets. 53% win rate, though. Last week was a down week. However, my friend, statistically, you're not going to finish under 50%, at least for the regular season.
That's true. That's exciting. Cool. Well, we have 5 more picks this week. I don't even need to do picks now. It's just like if I had realized that, I probably would have been a little bit more aggressive. So it's probably good that I didn't know that until this moment. So I went a little back and forth on this one, but I decided to go with Sam Howell over 215.5 passing yards against the Dallas Cowboys this week. So first off, Sam Howell already beat this line against the Cowboys once this year. He passed for 300 yards when they met earlier this season. Big gap between 215 and 300. Nice. The thing that concerns me about this, frankly, is that Howell has been awful lately. He hasn't hit this in like his past 3 or 4 starts. But what I realized is that in each of those starts, he only had like 20 to 25 pass attempts. And that correlated very strongly with him hitting the under on this mark. Whereas before kind of his past 3 games where he's had some of this down stretch of play, he was passing the ball at least 40 times per game. And when he was doing that, he was consistently hitting the over on 215.5 passing yards. I'm sure the Washington Commanders would love to play spoiler to the Dallas Cowboys' hopes, and also to just end their season on a win, get their fans something to be excited for going into next season. And Sam Howell is playing for his job. It's very clear that the fact that he was benched, like he's playing to keep the starting position. So I imagine they're going to pass the ball a ton, and he should be able to hit this over.
It's actually down 8 yards from his mark last week. I know this because I didn't see that he was starting and was like, oh my God, the dumb bookies left him on. So I took the under on a lot of like my thing. It paid. Don't get me wrong.
It worked,
was 23 and it worked. But I thought they screwed up and that he wasn't starting. And then I was like, oh, he is starting. This sucks. So, but like I said, that's down 8 yards. And I think Dallas is just as likely to give up big yards, if not more likely, than the San Francisco 49ers. So.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of that over. Another over we have is Wan'Dale Robinson, over 29.5 receiving yards. Already talked about this. The Eagles' pass defense, easy to pick on. So I feel good about that. Khalil Herbert, over 60.5 rushing yards. Green Bay, not good against the run.
That's true. I just get so nervous about picking a Bears running back who isn't Justin Fields.
Yeah, that's fair. But Khalil Herbert, he's coming off 2 consecutive games with at least 100 rushing yards. So they're starting to use him in the run game, which is nice. Yeah. Kenneth Walker, over 55.5 rushing yards, going up against the Arizona Cardinals. That's right. Yes. Arizona Cardinals, who have been bad against the run just all season. So just smash that over. Kenneth Walker also did really well when they played earlier this season. So I feel good about this line. And then James Conner, over 70.5 rushing yards. Seattle Seahawks, also bad against the run.
I say playing each other could be the shortest game of the day if they're just both going to run the ball the whole time. So.
I know, right? Which that's actually not good for this line, but whatever. And actually, literally, as I was making this pick, James Conner moved from 69.5 to 70.5 rushing yards. So it's trending in the right direction. Yeah. They saw me put it in my app. I was like, no. I have to move it up.
Exactly. Can't have this guy changing everything on us. No, I like those props a lot. One other pointer to look at for some of your week 18 props. Sal Vitri from Yahoo just put out a thread Monday of all of the player motivations salary wise this week. if you go look, there's a good history of teams who are trying to help these players get their bonuses, and you can find some nice prop bets that are in line with some of those things. So go look for any thread out there, but I saw Sal's. But there's a lot of threads out there with week 18 motivation for players. I know Jeff Bell just wrote an enormous article for Football Guys as well. So you guys can find that information out there. I can't recommend Football Guys enough. But I know you guys can find that information out there and use that to make some of the picks with your prop bets. Austin, as we end the show, we got the Valedictorian Shootout. I came back, so Kelly lost. That's just how it goes. You got her 111 to 100 even. But for the last week of the season, why not make things real weird? It's going to be me versus you, Austin. And so I will announce my lineup first. I put this together on DraftKings based on my rankings and a little bit of the notes I saw from you as well. So I have Derek Carr at quarterback. I'm going to be picking on your Falcons this week. Because we go DraftKings scoring, I went with Jahmyr Gibbs. And then my risky pick, I went with Ezekiel Elliott. I just feel like the Jets can be run on. I'm just hoping they don't decide to rest him because he's like old. They clearly have no reason to rest him. So I'm hoping he gets a full workload there. Again, I'm picking on the Falcons. You brought up AJ Terrell struggling. Give me Chris Olave, who does have a questionable mark right now. DK Metcalf, who's had some of his best games against the Arizona Cardinals. Calvin Ridley in a must-win game against that funnel defense in Tennessee. And then I had to throw in my flex, Wan'Dale Robinson, after what I've seen from him recently. Continuing with a triple stack against the Falcons. This worries me a little bit. So I have Carr, I have Olave, and I'm going to take Jawan Johnson. And I am bought in to what the Raiders are doing under Alec Pierce. And it's not Alec Pierce. It is. I don't know. Whatever. Their new head coach, Pierce. Long story short, I'm bought into the Raiders and I'm taking their defense, Austin.
Nice. I dig it. It's not Alec Pierce. That's the wide receiver. It's
from the Colts.
Antonio
Pierce. Thank you. Make me look like not like an ass. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. What's your lineup, buddy?
I knew it was an A. So we have some
and I said Alec earlier in the show as well. I knew it wasn't right then. So.
I missed that. That's incredible. So you're gonna regret picking on my Atlanta Falcons. I have to say that now. So we first got Justin Fields, who is $7,200. Then we have Rachaad White at $7,600. Kenneth Walker at $6,500. And then in my flex, I also have Ezekiel Elliott at $5,900. Fun fact, if Ezekiel Elliott scores 2 rushing touchdowns and Brian Robinson scores 1, I win $100.
I'm rooting for you, buddy. That's awesome. I forgot all about that.
Yeah, some preseason touchdown lines I took, and we're Elliott has gotten, I think, the amount of touchdowns to hit the over. He had too many receiving touchdowns.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to my lineup. At receiver, we have DJ Moore at $7K on the receiving end of that Justin Fields stack. Jacoby Myers at $5,400. I like this going up against Denver, hoping that Pat Surtain focuses his energy on Devonta Adams and it frees up Jacoby Myers. Then I also have Wan'Dale Robinson at $4,200. That left me just enough salary to get Tanner Hudson at $3,100 and the Atlanta Falcons defense at $3K.
So my lineup directly goes against your defense. So for me to win this matchup, I just need the Saints to go off. Guys, final reminder, you can play with us on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Links in the description of this video. Last week on DraftKings, Smitty12 won with 139.48. That is his second time, or her second time, my apologies, winning this contest. And then Jay Malaga won the FanDuel contest with 136.24. Third time winning the contest. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in this season. This is going to be the last episode specifically of DFS Academy. However, Austin's article isn't going anywhere, and we should have some playoff specials for you. One of Josh's babies, he's been trying to get off the ground for a little while. I know he and Austin are working out a way to make that work for the postseason and the playoffs. Austin, remind everybody where they can find you, what you're working on.
Yeah, you can find me on X and Instagram at Austin_FFL. Get all of my content at clubfantasyffl.com. And yeah, like Ryan said, Josh and I are planning to cover every single playoff game for the showdown slates. So you should have plenty of DFS content to fill your platter for the next couple of months.
Absolutely love it. Guys, Week 18 DFS Academy. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys are going to see this on Friday. Austin's article is going to drop in about 2 hours after you guys see this video. We appreciate each and every one of you. And if this is not enough to scratch your DFS itch, we move right into golf when the football season ends, and probably before the football season ends. I believe Kelly and Adam are planning this first episode within the next week. That is Who's Your Caddy. And if you have not played DFS golf, you should. It's fun. We're all degenerates. Find more ways to make money. And Kelly does such a great job with her picks, as does Adam, but I just love to talk Kelly up. These guys absolutely crush it. They make you money. You need to tune into that show. Look for that coming out in the coming weeks. And as Austin mentioned, DFS football isn't going anywhere for at least the next month. You guys have a wonderful weekend. I hope you guys won your championships last week. And if you're playing week 18, I hope it somehow goes well for you. Don't be afraid to bench the guys who are not going to get to play. Bench Travis Kelce, bench Patrick Mahomes, move on to the really weird guys like Rachaad Taylor. It's going to be a wild week 18. Have a good night.